Having some technical difficulties this morning, but looks like we're up and running now. My name is Max Radcliffe. I am with your EAP. We're now known as AdvocateAurora EAP. You probably know us as Aurora EAP. Same EAP, same great services, same 800 number, everything. So I'm gonna just go ahead and jump into the topic. Although I do see a couple of questions, so let me just see if those pertain to me. Okay, so it looks like those questions are answered. All right, so today's topic, we used to call it harassment training. Got a lot of jokes about that. Max is going to teach us how to harass each other, that type of thing. So then we went with anti-harassment training, and yeah, it just didn't really flow. So settled on respect in the workplace, because I think that's something that everybody can really identify with, is wanting to be respected, not liking being disrespected, etc. And I really believe that respect is contagious, just as disrespect is. And I think we reach a critical mass of respect in the workplace, and that becomes the culture of the organization. So before we jump into the core content, really quick EAP overview. This is something that is for all City of Burlington employees in all departments. Whether you take other benefits through the city or not, you get the EAP automatically. And it's not just for you, it's for your entire household, whoever is part of your household. Plus, if you have kids off at school, I'm sure some of you have kids going off to college this fall, we will still consider them part of your household. So the core benefit is free confidential access to our master's prepared state licensed EAP counselors. You can talk to them about anything you want, literally. There's no diagnosis required. Sometimes people talk about things like depression, anxiety. Sometimes people talk about family matters, relationships, parenting, stress management, you name it. So that's the core benefit. It's confidential. Nobody knows who calls, who visits. And we also have what we call our work-life specialists. These are everyone from financial counselors to attorneys. We do a child care search for your family. We have elder care experts, adoption counselors, school and college planners, and more. So all you do is call the 800 number on the screen, or you can access a lot of EAP services via the website as well. All right, so harassment, what is it? Well, we've had laws on the book for a long time, over 50 years, in fact. And a lot of this stuff kind of got started with the Civil Rights Act, Title VII of the Civil Rights Act of 1964. So we have various federal and state laws in play here. And what is it? Well, it's unwelcome, verbal, physical, or could be written or printed, electronic conduct based on any of those categories in purple. And those are what we call protected classes. And these are some of the ones under federal law: race, color, religion, national origin, age, disability, etc. And those can constitute harassment when, and also Wisconsin state law also has various protected classes as well as the federal. So again, we might be talking state and or federal law here. And you might see a few additional ones here that weren't in the federal list: use or non-use of lawful products, marital status, etc. All right, so when is it harassment? There's what they call the severe or pervasive standards. So I like to look at it as on a scale of 1 to 10. The severe is pretty easy to understand. It's really bad, very egregious. On the 1 to 10, we're talking maybe a 9 or something. Any reasonable person can look at that and say, yeah, that's obviously not cool. That's harassment. That's the easy one. The pervasive one is a little trickier because you don't have that really obvious one necessarily. You don't have that 9 on a scale of 1 to 10, but you might have, you know, a group of people, and maybe one person's doing a 4.5, and then another person down the hall is doing a 5.0, and then another person in your department's doing a 4.0. And you know, what tends to happen is people kind of grade themselves on a curve. They'll say a couple of things. They'll say, A, what I'm doing wasn't that bad, pretty moderate. And then what people also frequently do is they will kind of justify their own behavior by other people's misbehavior. So they'll say something like, well, I'm not doing anything worse than my coworkers, or, you know, everybody's doing it, or, you know, coworker A is doing something much worse than I am. So kind of justifying their own behavior, grading on a curve. The problem is none of those things will really hold up in court if there's a lawsuit or something. All those people together are combining a hostile environment. The other type of harassment is what they call quid pro quo, and this is kind of the classical, what most people would think of if you asked them, what is harassment? It's a Latin term. It simply means this for that, and usually we think of this in terms of sexual harassment. In other words, a boss, a supervisor, a director, somebody with a power differential over someone else tries to pressure them or extract some sort of sexual favor in exchange for a tangible change in their employment status or lack thereof. So in other words, in very simple terms, a person might say something, if you don't sleep with me, you're fired, or something like that. But it doesn't have to be fired. It could be demoted, reassigned, put on a shift you don't like, not given a promotion that you deserve, anything like that. So that's the quid pro quo. And again, back to that hostile work environment, there's that word unwelcome again. So let's just say, you know, a lot of people, maybe they do meet in the workplace. People meet, they date, sometimes they go out, sometimes they get married, you know, it happens. And not too many workplaces have what they call an anti-fraternization policy, where that is against the policy. So if there is no anti-fraternization policy, then it's typically considered okay to ask a coworker, hey, how'd you like to go out for a cup of coffee? Or, you know, would you like to catch a movie or something like that? Now, where it becomes problematic, if it's unwelcome, if the person responds with, no, not in a million years, yuck, please get away from me, no thank you, then you really have to respect that. So if you ask a coworker, hey, how would you like to go out on a date or something, and their response is, absolutely not, please leave me alone, then you really need to respect that. Because if you don't, and you keep persisting, then that can be harassment. So, and as far as the hostile work environment goes, the way I like to look at it is, you know, we all work for basically the same reason, to make a living, to be able to pay our mortgage, our rent, support our families, buy food, pay car payments, all that kind of stuff. So everybody ought to be able to be free to go to work, do their job without encountering a hostile work environment that's actually interfering with their basic ability to do their job. That's not too much to ask. That's a pretty minimal expectation. All right, so when it comes to the harasser, again, a lot of times we think of that classical boss harassing someone that reports to them. And yes, that is one possibility. It could be someone in management, could be the harasser, but it could be a coworker, it could be a contractor, it could be a vendor, it could be a guest. And they could be either the harasser or the victim of harassment. So really, anybody who has anything to do with the operations of the city, any of your departments, is really covered by this. And here's another blind spot I've seen. Sometimes people have said, I've heard people say this, well, it's okay for me to say, let's just say racial things to this guy who's pictured because I happen to be in that same ethnic group myself, and you know, he's not offended, we're buddies, we're brothers, whatever. And that is a blind spot. And I've seen that happen sometimes with various people in various protected classes, that somehow they think that there's an exception that allows them to say things that nobody else could. And that may be true outside of the workplace, in the general culture at large, but that certainly is not true in the workplace under these laws. And I've seen it with, another example would be maybe an elderly person who's thinking, I actually used to work with a guy like this, who thought, well, since I'm a little older myself, I can make old people jokes. I can rip on old people, make fun of old people, stuff like that, you know, kind of with a wink and a nod because, you know, I'm old myself. And it's kind of a surprising blind spot, but it just shows how a lot of times these things are not malicious. It's just something that for some reason just escapes our awareness at times. And, you know, it happens. And the thing to do is if we realize it, correct our own behavior, and if somebody else brings it to our attention, correct our own behavior. You know, nobody's perfect, but the idea is to be as respectful as possible towards each other. And if we do accidentally slip up, or maybe it wasn't even accidental, correct our behavior as quickly as possible. You know, apologize to that person if it's appropriate. That sexual hostile environment, again, some of these things are a little tough to define, like leering suggestively. How would you define that? I think everybody knows what it means. It's kind of looking at a person kind of in a sexual sort of a way, undressing them with your eyes, kind of looking them up and down, the elevator eyes, that type of thing. Makes people uncomfortable. Offensive remarks about a person's body, clothes, etc. Now it doesn't, let's not be ridiculous about it. It doesn't mean you can't say, oh, hey, nice Packer hat. You know, or, oh, you got a new pair of shoes, those are cool. It doesn't mean that. It means when you start making more invasive, suggestive, sexual remarks about the person's clothing or their body, or how the clothing fits the body, or, you know, any of that type of stuff. If it's in that gray area, just leave it out. If in doubt, leave it out. Touching, obviously, we should keep our hands to ourselves in the workplace. You know, there's certain acceptable ritualized forms of touching that are normally acceptable in our non-COVID era. You know, things such as a handshake are typically considered to be okay. But in this COVID era, obviously, we're practicing social distancing and whatnot. So, you know, rule of thumb, give people their space, whether it's COVID or not, if we're doing social distancing or not, we ought to at least always try to give people, you know, a good arm's length of room around their personal space. Invading people's space, patting, pinching, brushing, touching, any of that, obviously not cool in the workplace. Sometimes people say, well, they liked it, or they wanted me to, or they asked me to, or they told me to. It doesn't matter. We're not, you know, at a movie theater or at somebody's apartment. We are in the workplace. So the workplace just really isn't an appropriate venue for PDA. And, you know, even if, let's just say we're talking a married couple, still common sense applies here. We're not going to be, you know, engaging in affectionate activities within the workplace. And that's just common sense. Any sort of lewd or dirty jokes, gestures, posters, writing, any of that, steer clear of that in the workplace. And, you know, of course, in this day and age, we're talking electronic communication, text, email, you know, Snapchat, all these different things, social media. And at least early on, there was somewhat of a belief among some people that, well, social media, I can kind of do whatever I want on there. I can go on Facebook and say whatever I want about whomever, and that absolutely is not the case. It's almost like a virtual workplace, and if it involves, you know, the workplace or the job or the city or the citizens or the coworkers or whatever, just use common sense. It's almost just the same as if you walked up to them and said it in person. The racial area, this is very common sense. Any racially derogatory terms about any racial group, any racially offensive gestures, drawings, comments about skin color, or sometimes we get the disparaging gender remarks. And it could be, you know, women making comments about men or vice versa, or men about other men, anything like that. If in doubt, leave it out. So, you know, most of us have a filter. We kind of think before we speak. And of course, we always hear about the person, oh, so-and-so just doesn't have a filter. Well, that can be a problem for that person, because we need to have a filter. We need almost to have like a delay type of thing like they have on TV, in case the guest on a show uses a profanity or something, they can, you know, bleep it out before it goes live. We kind of need to do that with ourselves on an ongoing basis. Doesn't mean we have to walk on eggshells. It means, you know, there's something called the line. Don't go over the line. Most people have a relatively decent approximation of where that line is. My rule for myself and my suggestion for others is give about a foot or two of space on the side of the line. Give yourself an extra cushion, and then you'll be pretty sure not to go over the line, as they say. And it's not that hard to do. It doesn't mean you can't talk to people at work. It doesn't mean you can't have humor. It doesn't mean you can't have friends. It doesn't mean you can't even, joke around a little bit. It just means use common sense. If in doubt, leave it out. If you know where the line is, give a good couple of feet extra cushion between your conduct, your speech, and the line. If we're all doing that, we're probably going to be in pretty good shape here. Comments about age, disability, country of origin, all obviously same thing, steer clear. All right, so again, that tangible employment action with that quid pro quo could be anything affecting aspects of the job. All right, so not everything is harassment. In order for something to actually be harassment under the law, the person complaining, the complainant, must be part of one of those protected classes. And they must be subject to some unwelcome conduct related to the fact that they are in that class. And the conduct is based on their membership in that class. So in other words, there could be jerky, obnoxious behavior that isn't necessarily harassment under the law. However, that doesn't mean that it's then okay. It still could be, not exactly what the city or your department is looking for in terms of professional conduct, communication, demeanor, teamwork, etc. So if we just kind of apply these basic principles to all of our interactions with anyone, whether they're a coworker, our boss, a subordinate, a citizen, whomever, then we'll be in good shape. Again, it has to be that unwelcome conduct, either affecting a condition of their employment or unreasonably interfering with their ability to do that job, creating that intimidating, hostile, or offensive work environment. Simple teasing, again, it's not necessarily against the law, state or federal, but it still doesn't mean that it's something we want to engage in. And remember though, that severe or pervasive. And again, the severe part's pretty easy. The pervasive part is what tends to trip people up. So don't grade our conduct on a curve. Don't justify it based on the fact that somebody else is doing it or doing worse. Just compare our conduct to what we should be doing or not doing, as opposed to what other people are doing. I like this history of mutual respect. If we are really making a good faith, honest effort to be respectful of everyone, it doesn't mean we have to like them personally. It doesn't mean we want to hang out with them outside of work. It doesn't mean we agree with them about politics or religion, or, we could have a lot of disagreements on a lot of things, but that's not what brings us together in the workplace. So if our starting point is, you know what, I'm gonna be the best coworker I can be to you, regardless of all those other extraneous factors. And yes, I'm going to respect you as a coworker, a fellow employee of the city of Burlington. That's going to go a long way. And then, let's just say accidentally something came out wrong. People would kind of get, oh, geez, that doesn't sound like Max. And, if I catch myself doing it, the best thing to do is just kind of nip it in the bud and apologize right away. Like, wow, I'm sorry, that really came out wrong. Or, gee, I really didn't mean to offend you. I apologize. And just be done with it. Clear the air. Because otherwise, these things can kind of linger, and really don't want that. All right, so these things apply especially to supervisors, but I would say anybody. And the first thing is, what does your policy say? What do your city policies, if you have special department policies, what do they actually say? And I think that the people at the top of an organization really set the tone for the culture of any organization. And I've been working in EAP field for 20 plus years now, so it's been very interesting for me to really see hundreds of different organizations and kind of see how they function. Some good, some great, some not so good. And really what I see is, again, people at the top of the organization really setting the tone. So model the behavior that you want to see. And if you're seeing things in people that you supervise, intervene earlier than often. And it can be in a It can still be in kind of a kind, educational way. Hey, you know, we just learned something in our harassment training. I think this might be exactly what that Max guy was talking about. Can we find another way to talk about this, or how could we steer clear of potentially being offensive, that type of thing. Coaching and educating, that's what we do. Even the best athletes in the world need coaching and education, and most people respond to that. And I think a lot of it is how it's delivered. So, you know, if I was, as an employee, was doing, let's just say, a pretty good job, but I never heard about any of the parts of my job that I was doing well, but I just heard criticism about the parts I wasn't doing well, people can get resentful. So I think it's always important to, if you do have some coaching or education or re-education, to kind of say, you know, you are extremely solid in this area, this area, this area. Here's an area where I think you could be even better. You know, let's talk about this a little bit. So you're coaching and educating, and then hold people accountable. As I said before, sometimes we really are dealing with blind spots. They don't see it, or it's kind of been accepted. That's just how everybody always talks to each other. Or sometimes I've seen this, people know each other outside of work, and this is maybe how they talk, how they communicate outside of work, and then they just bring that into the workplace. So some things that might be acceptable maybe in other venues, maybe, you know, the home, or let's just say the bowling alley or the tavern or whatever, absolutely might not be acceptable within the workplace. So hold people accountable. Catch them if they're doing something good, reinforce those positive changes. But if the problem is persisting, if it's not getting better, then, you know, you need to hold people accountable. And any employee who's listening to this, you know, you're not going to be supervising or, you know, putting your coworkers on a performance improvement plan or anything like that. But if you're hearing things, or if somebody says something to you that's offensive, you know, you can say, hey, you know what, I don't appreciate that. I think I don't like that type of humor. No, I don't want to go out with you. You know, please stop, that type of thing. And a lot of people will stop. And then the EAP is always a great resource. For one thing, being on the receiving end of harassment can be pretty tough. We've had people call us confidentially. They just want to talk through a counselor, kind of talk through what they've been experiencing, and just have a, you know, a neutral outside person that they can talk to. On the other hand, sometimes the person doing the harassing, there might be an accusation, then an investigation, and then it's determined, yep, that's harassment, all right, that's not good. And then the employer wants to provide some sort of training, education along those lines. And then sometimes people are referred to the EAP. Hey, why don't you go to the EAP and, you know, work with one of their counselors and get some tips on how not to harass your coworkers. So good resources. And then management consultation. If you're in leadership, you can always give me a call too, and we can confer about things. All right, so I kind of like the self-test questions. I've heard and read a lot about harassment over the years, all the different state and federal laws, and, you know, a lot of them are written in legalese, which, you know, unless you're an attorney, it can get pretty confusing pretty fast. And then you have all the different court cases, precedents, all that stuff. It can get confusing. I like to keep it simple. If I honestly ask myself these questions and answer them honestly, I can kind of pretty quickly determine if my behavior or speech is a good fit for the workplace. So I like this first one. Would I want my behavior on the nightly news or on the front page of the Burlington newspaper or on a video in a courtroom? If not, then I should just not be doing that in the workplace. If in doubt, leave it out. Would I behave in the same way in front of my spouse, partner, or significant other? Sometimes we may be, you know, flirting, borderline harassing other co-workers of the opposite or same sex. And would we be doing that if our spouse or partner was there? If not, maybe leave that out. How would I feel if someone acted this way towards my spouse, child, family member, or close friend? The old golden rule. If I wouldn't like it, then I shouldn't be doing it. And a lot of times, for some reason, it's just so much easier to see the offensive things that other people are doing to us. And some of it is nonverbal communications, the things we can't see in ourselves. It's not just the words coming out of our mouth, it's how we say it, our facial expressions, all that type of stuff. So if I wouldn't like it, then I shouldn't do it. Does my behavior contribute to the organization? Is it consistent with our mission? And again, after all, that's what brings us all together in the workplace. Each of us kind of has a contract with our employer to perform certain duties in exchange for certain benefits, pay and fringe benefits, etc. That is what brings us together in the workplace. And that's not to say that we can't have fun or can't have friendships or humor. Of course we can. Just not humor that is actually harassment, or not humor that's targeting other people in a negative sort of fashion. That leaves a lot of humor. Could my behavior be seen as harmful or harassing, discriminatory, or offensive based on protected classes in the various state and federal laws? Not did I intend it to be that way? Because one of the things I've seen after people are found guilty to be in fact harassing someone else and they're sent to the EAP or elsewhere, one of the things I almost always see is the person will say, I was just kidding, or I was just joking, just playing around. Or they will also frequently say, I didn't intend to harass them. It wasn't my intent to be guilty of harassment. And guess what? Neither of those things will hold up at all in a defense, in a courtroom. So be careful with the humor. And it's not the intent, it's the content. What is said, what is done, what is written, what is emailed, what is texted, etc. And if there's any people that aren't in a protected class, let's be nice to them too. It's not open season on them. And as I said before, everybody likes to be respected. It feels good. The other thing is it also feels good to extend respect towards others. And it is contagious. People will typically reciprocate. Not always, but it is contagious, just as disrespect and bad behavior is contagious. I have seen cases that started with kind of a little jawing or busting each other's chops, or just pushing each other's buttons a little, maybe a little edge to it. And then the first person might fire back or retaliate, but they might up the ante a little bit. And then the original person might say, oh yeah, well, how about this? And it can just kind of escalate. And I've seen these things escalate to threats. I've seen them escalate to actual violence. And they started with, seemingly kind of innocuous little joshing back and forth. So again, it doesn't mean we can't have fun or humor in the workplace. Just be careful with that type of stuff. What to do if you feel you are being harassed? Tell them to stop. It's not always necessarily easy. It could be very uncomfortable. Let's just say the person harassing you is your boss or your supervisor. That can be very uncomfortable. But if you can assertively, directly say, please stop. No, thank you. No, I do not want to go out with you. No, thank you. And sometimes, it's hard to find the words. So I'm kind of a big fan of hand signals, kind of the no, thank you. No, really, no. And, believe it or not, pretty large majority of people will stop, 85%. If they don't, then you definitely want to get some help. And if the initial thing that they're doing is pretty serious in your estimation, let somebody know. But tell them to stop if you can. If they don't, take action. Talk to somebody. Talk to your supervisor if you can, or HR. Talk to Jason in HR, or other leader that you trust. Now it can be scary, so you have to seek out somebody that you feel you can really talk to and trust to share what's going on. And if it's an ongoing thing, keep a record too. And it's important to let HR know sooner than later, especially if it's something that could become serious and maybe ultimately turn into a lawsuit or something like that. It's important to hear about it sooner than later so it can be stopped, re-education, et cetera, can be done. As I said, if you're on the receiving end of this, it's not fun, it's not easy. Find support. Friends, family, pastor, counselor, EAP, talk to somebody. All right, quick review quiz. Sexual harassment can only happen to a woman. True or false? Yeah, it's kind of the classic, the jerk guy is harassing the victim female. And yeah, that still is the majority of cases. If you look up the stats at, say, the EEOC or something, that's the majority of cases is still men harassing women. But that percentage, that overall percentage of men harassing women has dropped year after year after year after year. It's still the largest category, but it's dropping. All the other categories are going up, and that means women harassing men. Yes, women can harass men. Men harassing other men. Women harassing other women. So kind of answered this one. The victim of harassment does not have to be the opposite gender of the harassee. And if I refuse to date this guy, my boss, and then lose my job, that is that classic quid pro quo type of harassment. An employee witnessing another employee being harassed, can they also be considered a victim of harassment? Absolutely, especially if they are in that same protected class. The sexy pictures on a person's cubicle wall are considered personal items and therefore not subject to harassment law. True or false? That's obviously false. Now let's just say the person has decorated their cubicle with, racy pictures, centerfolds from Playboy, things like that. Obviously it's not appropriate in the workplace. To bring a lawsuit, a victim needs to show they suffered economic harm. That is actually false. What if the employee kind of joins in the banter? Could they still be a victim of sexual harassment? Sometimes that would be the defense of the harasser. Well, they liked it, they joined in, they were going back and forth with me, right along. But let's just say it started, as it often does, kind of a low level, sort of innocuous, and then maybe the person joined in, oh, this seems kind of fun, maybe, and then maybe it started to ramp up a little, and then at some point, the person got uncomfortable and thought, why did I ever start this? I want to get myself out of this. I don't want to do this anymore. So they decide to stop. Of course, they are entitled to do that. It doesn't mean since they participated in the banter at some point that they forfeit all rights from that point forward. If an employee doesn't complain immediately about offensive behavior, the behavior is probably welcome, right? Of course not. Now, why would a person not complain immediately? Maybe they're afraid. Maybe they're embarrassed. Maybe they're stunned. Maybe they don't know what to say or who to talk to. Maybe they're just so embarrassed or nervous. There's lots of reasons. If a company or organization has a harassment prevention policy, that organization is then shielded from complaints. That is false. I mean, it can be, let's just say things went bad and ended up in court. It could be a partial defense that, yes, we do have a policy. Yes, we train our employees and their supervisors and that type of thing, but it isn't what I'd call a shield. Company does not have to be concerned with the conduct of non-employees. That's false. As I said, let's just say someone comes to your building in the city delivering water or something. It doesn't mean that you can harass them because they're not a City of Burlington employee, or vice versa. It doesn't mean that you have to subject yourself to their harassment either. And if that's happening, let somebody know. This one, they're not just participating in banter, they are actually submitting to requests for sexual favors. Then they must forfeit their rights, right? Because, well, no, they don't. And this happens all the time too. In relationships, sometimes people become an item and then they're not. They break up for whatever reason. One person ends it, both do. It doesn't mean that the person has no rights after that point. So they could even be married and then they're not. Unfortunately, it happens. Divorce happens all the time. And, once one person opts out, the other person needs to respect that, whether they want to or not. If in doubt, leave it out. If you're not sure, always talk to your HR folks. I know Jason is a good guy. He's someone you can definitely talk to. I guess, Jason, I'd ask if you wanted to jump in at this point and make any comments. I think we could certainly do that.
Yeah, no, thank you very much, Max. I think that you wrapped it up very, very nicely. I want to especially emphasize if you feel that there's something happening that isn't right, if you feel offended, if you're not sure, please reach out and emphasize the sooner the better. The quicker that we can take a look at a complaint or investigate an issue, the better it is for everyone, because we certainly don't want to let any actions or offensive behavior continue on. We want everyone to show up to work and feel safe and feel comfortable and not feel like they have to be subject to behavior that you don't tolerate. The City of Burlington has a zero tolerance policy towards harassment and retaliation. But in addition to all of that, we want to make sure, especially in the last few months, we're seeing a lot of different things happening in life. We want to make sure that everybody feels welcome, and that same not only just for our employees, but also for our residents and those who come and receive services from the City of Burlington. We should have that culture of respect, which is why I really appreciate, Max, your rendition of the respectful workplace, because it does really incorporate all of the above. Do unto others as you want done unto yourself, I think is the bottom line here. So I don't know if you have anything else, Max, but I would like
no, it's just, feel free to call the EAP for any of those things I mentioned, or if you're not sure, just give us a call, or definitely, talk to Jason in HR. He's very knowledgeable about the EAP. It's just a great resource for you and your families.
So at this time, I'd like to open it up. If there are any questions, there should be a button at the bottom of your screens, whether you're on a phone or a computer or a tablet, that allows you to ask a question in the Q&A section. So if there are any questions, please select that option, and we'll give a few moments for people to ask if there are any questions. Not seeing anything come through. So with that ends today's session. Thank you everyone for your time. Thank you for your patience in this unorthodox manner of training. Oh, wait, we do have a question popping up here. Oh, thanks, Max.
All right, let's see what we get. Oh, hey, you are more than welcome. Thank you.
So thank you, and thank you everyone.
All right. And if you have additional questions you think of, you can certainly get those to Jason. If there's anything you wanted me to answer, Jason can certainly get those to me as well. So have a great day, everybody, and take care.
Take care, everyone. Thank you. Stay safe.